I'm Claire Ridgway. I'm the founder of the Anne Boleyn Files, and I'm also the author of several Anne Boleyn books, including this one, The Fall of Anne Boleyn, A Countdown, which looks at Anne Boleyn's fall as a kind of day-by-day sort of diary, looking at the events that led up to her execution on the 19th of May, 1536. Now, today is the anniversary of an event in 1536, something that was probably a factor in Anne Boleyn's fall. And I'm putting this in my Anne Boleyn questions series because I get a lot of questions about this event. Because on this day in history, the 29th of January 1536, the same day that her predecessor, Catherine of Aragon, was buried at Peterborough Abbey, Queen Anne Boleyn suffered a miscarriage. Now, it is often said that the fetus that Anne Boleyn miscarried was deformed, and this idea appears in fiction and some non-fiction as well. And it's been used to support the idea that Anne Boleyn committed incest with her brother, and or that she was involved in witchcraft. That's the reason apparently that, she gave birth to this deformed fetus, because she'd been involved in those things. But we actually need to ask ourselves first, did Anne Boleyn actually miscarry a deformed fetus? And that's the question that I'm often asked. Well, the short answer is no, she didn't. And we could just end the video there, but that's not very interesting, is it? No, she didn't. Well, not according to contemporary sources. And what I mean by contemporary sources is sources that were written at that time in 1536, not long after the event or at the same time as the event. Now, there are four main pieces of contemporary evidence for Anne Boleyn's miscarriage. We have Edward Hall's Chronicle, we have Charles Risley's Chronicle, a dispatch written by Eustace Chapuis, who was the imperial ambassador. He sent letters and dispatches to other ambassadors and also to his master, Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. And then we also have a poem written in French by Lancelot de Carle. Now, he wrote, "On the day of the interment," which is Catherine of Aragon's funeral, "the concubine," Anne Boleyn, "had an abortion which seemed to be a male child which she had not borne 3.5 months, at which the king has shown great distress. The said concubine wished to lay the blame on the Duke of Norfolk, whom she hates, saying he frightened her by bringing the news of the fall the king had 6 days before. But it is well known that it is not the cause, for it was told her in a way that she should not be alarmed or attach much importance to it." So he's reporting on the miscarriage and also saying that Anne blamed it on her uncle for bringing her news of Henry VIII's jousting accident and sort of frightening her, because it was believed that if you experienced a fright or saw something frightening, that could damage the baby in some way or lead to a miscarriage. Now, the chronicler Edward Hall dates the miscarriage wrong in his chronicle, but states simply, "And in February following was Queen Anne brought to bed of a child before her time, which was born dead." Herald Charles Risley records, "This year also, 3 days before Candlemas, Queen Anne was brought to bed and delivered of a man-child, as it was said, afore her time. For she said that she had reckoned herself at that time but 15 weeks gone with child." In his poem on the life and death of Anne Boleyn, as I said, written in French, Lancelot de Carle writes that Anne, and I'm translating into English here, prematurely gave birth to a beautiful boy whose stillbirth led to many tears. So there we have 4 records, 4 accounts written by people who were at court at the time. And we have no mention of a deformed baby. The baby, the fetus that was miscarried, is just described as a child, a man-child, a male child, and a beautiful boy. So where on earth does this idea come from that Anne miscarried some kind of monstrous fetus, a deformed fetus? Where does this idea come from? Well, we have to jump forward nearly 50 years from Anne Boleyn's miscarriage to 1585 in the reign of Anne's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I. That year, Catholic recusant Nicholas Sander published a work in Latin which has been translated into English as Rise and Growth of the Anglican Schism. In this book, he wrote of Anne Boleyn's miscarriage. The time had now come when Anne was to be again a mother, but she brought forth only a shapeless mass of flesh. Now, Nicholas Sander was a priest in exile. He wanted Elizabeth I deposed. He supported the idea that Elizabeth I should be removed from the throne so that the true faith, Catholicism, could be restored, brought back to England. England could come into the Roman fold once more. He was not an Elizabeth I fan. And Elizabeth, of course, was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. So his whole aim really is to blacken them both. Earlier in his book, he describes Anne Boleyn as having a projecting tooth, 6 fingers on her right hand, and a large wen under her chin. He also suggests that Henry VIII actually fathered Anne Boleyn, having slept with her mother Elizabeth Howard when after he'd sent Thomas Boleyn abroad on a mission. And then also in the same book, we have Anne Boleyn at 15 sinning, i.e. having sexual relations with her father's butler, and then moving on to her father's chaplain before going off to France and then becoming King Francis I's royal mule, as in mistress. So he's not an Anne Boleyn fan. Are you getting the idea from that? That, yes, he's not an Anne Boleyn or Elizabeth I fan. Now, those tales, that description of Anne, those tales about her early life, they're not backed up by any other sources, and neither is his idea that Anne Boleyn miscarried this shapeless mass of flesh on the 29th of January 1536. What he's clearly doing, is trying to blacken Anne Boleyn's name completely and so tar the reputation of the queen who is on the throne at the moment, Elizabeth I, who he feels is not the rightful queen. Now, Anne Boleyn's biographer, the late Professor Eric Ives, whose book The Life and Death of Anne Boleyn I'd highly recommend, he pointed out that no deformed fetus was mentioned at the time or later in Henry's reign, despite Anne's disgrace, nor was it mentioned in Mary I's reign, when there was every motive and opportunity to blacken Anne. So it doesn't come until 1585 with Nicholas Sander's account. So when the only source stating that Anne Boleyn miscarried a shapeless mass, which has been sort of twisted into a deformed fetus, when the only source stating that is written nearly 50 years after the event, when the writer, if you think about it, the writer Nicholas Sander was only a small child when the event happened. I think he was born in 1530, so he was about 6 years old. He wasn't at the royal court at the time, and this event is recorded in a book that is Catholic propaganda, which is against the Reformation and against Elizabeth. Then you have to take it with a huge pinch of salt. When you combine that with the fact that the information is not backed up by any contemporary sources or any near contemporary sources, and Sander's book is littered with inaccuracies and suspect information, then I think we can safely discount it. We can just say, well, that obviously didn't happen. It's an error, or it's just someone trying to blacken Anne's name. Anne Boleyn suffered a tragic miscarriage on the 29th of January 1536, and it may have been a factor in her fall. It may have convinced her husband that he would not have sons by her, so it could have been a factor in her fall. But there was absolutely nothing unusual about the fetus that she lost on that day. It's very sad, but lots of women have miscarriages at that time at around the 3-month mark, and it is not unusual. So I hope that has cleared that up for you. It's obviously something that makes great fiction. I mean, we have it in The Other Boleyn Girl, for example, which is a very, very popular novel featuring Anne Boleyn as one of the main characters. And we have it in that because it makes good fiction, it makes good movies and TV, but there is no truth in it. I'd love to hear your comments on this, though. What you think of it, what you think of Nicholas Sander. So please do comment below this video, and you can subscribe to the channel by clicking on the little button that says subscribe there. And I'll be doing more of these, answering questions from Anne Boleyn Files followers about Anne Boleyn and the Boleyns. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.